Hi everyone, my name is Xander and this is Before the Journey, My Early Childhood, Part 16. Before I continue, may I ask you to please watch parts 1 through 15. If you have not watched parts 1 through 15, you will be lost if you start here. So now that we got that out of the way, let me give you a recap of part 15. Okay, in part 15, I was basically giving the conclusion of living with my stepfather. I told you how he got sick, how briefly he passed away. I didn't go into too much detail into that. And I also discussed his memorial service and ended a chapter completely in part 15. So now that we got that out of the way, let me go ahead and start part 16. So, a month or so after my stepdad's passing, if you guys remember one of his friends I briefly mentioned in part 10, well, he comes back into our lives. Yep, he came back into our lives. This time, he wasn't only coming back to our lives only temporary, he was coming back to our lives a little bit longer. When I first met the man through my stepfather, I thought he was a very nice guy. Lo and behold, he has 2 sons, so I thought, he knew how to be a father to kids. Or he knew how to be, I knew in my mind he was good with kids, long story short. But I would later learn whatever I was thinking is actually dead wrong. Because even though he was coming back into our lives, he hit a dark side. A very not so good dark side. And it was going to hurt dealing with this man's dark side. So it's now coming to almost time to go back to school in the year of 97. I was going into the 5th grade, of course, and my brother, on the other hand, who I think he was going into 1st or 2nd. I don't exactly recall. But I was going into the 5th grade, and going into the 5th grade, it was like senior year for grade school, or so I thought. But what I didn't know, this will not be my senior year for grade school. There would be other plans that change that. So, going into 5th grade, I have the same teacher, Mr. V, and the same classroom. Never really could escape Mr. V, but don't really care. There were some new friends, some new foes that were going to come about into the mix. And there was going to be one particular girl that would bully me and probably get on my last nerve. But she would be a hard lesson from my mother in the importance of respecting women. Now, before I go any further, may I remind you I did not lay a hand on this girl. I didn't touch her. The hard lesson would be much more different than going to get a suspension in dealing with a girl who just wants to be a little bully. So, now back to the important stuff. Now that you know what school is going to be like for me. So, when my stepfather's friend, soon to be fiance to my mother, came back into our lives, he and my mother started dating. And a lot sooner, I may add. Surprisingly, my mom couldn't stay single long enough. And practically she already knew him, so she decided, okay, one guy's out of my life, I need some support, I'll go for this guy. She did, but it would be one of the biggest mistakes she'd ever make. He had a temper, and he was hiding it. He unloaded his charm, and I guess he wanted a shot with my mom after my stepfather passed. You see, the one thing you gotta know about my mother, and I haven't mentioned this in prior parts, is that she was a knockout to a lot of different men. And respectfully, I'm not trying to be rude, but it's the truth. A lot of men found my mother to be very, very gorgeous. Me, on the other hand, I was the kind of boy who just kept to himself at this time and realized, it is a blessing to have a mother who looks good to the male eye, but at the same time, you also gotta understand. Sometimes I wish, now that I think about it, she'd really see if she was equally yoked to these guys. My mother, God rest her soul, she had no idea the kind of men she was inviting into my life and my brother's. She thought they were the typical men who would accept my brother and she gave him a shot, and it just blows up in her face. She was also hiding a secret, not only from my stepfather's friend, but from my brother and I as well. Her secret was that she wasn't too good either on her end. She was ill, sick if you will, or she was getting to that point. So there were secrets, and they weren't such nice secrets either, that were kept, locked away, wouldn't find out till a very long time, like years later, if you will. So, when he first came into our lives, again, he was living in his own place with his two sons. One named after him, and one not named after him. He had an older and younger son. The oldest was older than me, and the youngest was older than my brother. So, we have two more boys in our lives. What I didn't know is, living with their father, they played follow the leader a lot with him. they would later become domestic bullies to me, unfortunately. But looking back, I don't really blame them. They were kids, and you do not blame children for a parent's mistake. So if you are watching this, I want to let you know in advance that I don't blame you for what went down when we were kids. And you know who you are. If anything, we were all living in a tough situation. So if the two young boys that are now adults are watching this, that was the sons of my stepfather's friend. I'm not mentioning names. Just know how I feel about that. You are not at fault. And yes, I do forgive you. Just as much as I forgive your father. So, at first it was just his own place, and he stayed there for a little longer. And I think once things started getting real serious with my mother, that's when he moved to Timberwood. When he moved to Timberwood, everything changed. The family lounge that was supposed to be strictly for a family lounge that my stepfather built became the room where me and his older son stayed in. The room that was once mine and my brother's became the room of his youngest son and my brother. So now I'm staying in a place, in a room, a new life, a big change. I didn't think anything of it. It was nice to have a different room for once. But it was a quick change of pace. Everything changed. We were sharing a room still, but with his sons. I realized he was into wrestling. He loved wrestling a lot. When WWE was known as WWF back then in 97 to 98, he got into NWO, which you may remember back in the day is called New World Order. And getting into NWO, he had this little thing with me, his two sons, and my brother called, the Wolfpack. Like, he was the biggest fan. He made a little Wolfpack club of what he got as inspiration from wrestling. And he'd watch it every single night. While me, his two sons, and my brother were asleep, he was staying up to watch wrestling. Like, seriously. Don't know how he stayed up that long, but he was addicted. But the wrestling would cause him to do evil things later. It would not be a good influence to him. So, when we first started living with him, everything was great. It was like we had a new guy in our lives, and we were still getting somewhat spoiled, but not as much with my stepfather. And just everything seemed good. And then one day, out of the clear blue, I think it was late 97, possibly Yeah, somewhere around there, late 97. Because I remember, I don't exactly recall, but the first half of him living with us was great. We got to meet his family. He became a big part of our lives. Kind of wish now he wasn't, but everything comes with a lesson. So I just had this thought. I'm trying to remember a little more before I go into full detail. Give or take a month or two later, because I don't have a lot of memories of this guy that are good. So we're going to have to fast forward a little bit because I want to tell you the story of him, but at the same time, I don't have a lot of good memories. I have some, but they're overrode by bad. So I remember, give or take, later 97, possibly early 98, but later 97, I think it was. We would go to his friend's house a couple times. She was a nice lady, and so my mother and him can have some alone time. During that alone time, once again, my mother's having her private times, doing things she shouldn't be doing, just like with my stepfather. Yep, just like with my stepfather. And she would do that a lot with him. You see, he was one way with her, but he would soon be another way with my brother and I, and his two sons. He'd hide a mask when he's around her. One particular day, I remember we were doing the Wolfpack thing again, and I wanted to be a kid. I wanted to have fun with the little Wolfpack thing, because the Wolfpack went like this. And then we'd all touch fingers, 3 fingers, and we'd have the time of our life. But one day I did something he didn't like. Yes, I have to get to the abuse sooner because, I don't have any other memories but this. Yes, you're about to find out. This is where the abuse kicks in. One day, I'm doing this. And we're doing the Wolfpack thing, and he didn't like that. He flipped off the handle on me. I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, what the fuck? Looking at him. Like, point blank looking at him. This is what was going through my head. I'm just being a kid. I told him I was making an intervention. And he yelled me out. So bad, I started crying. I went to my new room. He came in there, and this time he looks me dead in the face. And I remember it. I said, while crying, I said, I would not make a good son to you. Like, literally, just like tears going down my face while I'm crying. And he said, you know what? You're right. You wouldn't make a good son to me. You want to see an invention? That's an invention. Yours is stupid. As soon as he realized I was a bit of a baby and I couldn't stick up for myself, oh boy, all hell broke loose. So the rest of the time of him living with us, a good portion of it would be abusive. And oh God, was it? And I'll tell you one thing. I was in for the rudest, worst awakening of my life. The rest of 97, let alone the spring and the summertime of 98, was going to be hell. I went to school, but it seemed like school was the only safe haven for me. The only thing that made home safe now was basically my mom. I remember the things he did. I didn't know what I did to deserve such hatred, such evil. I felt as a child it was my fault. I shouldn't have done this, and he wouldn't have been so mean to me. I just didn't know why a man like that would lose his temper. And I was the first out of my mother and my brother to deal with this man's temper. I was too afraid to say something. I knew he'd beat me to a pulp if I did. And I know one thing. I was scared. Scared for my life. Dealing with this man. He scared me. I remember he'd keep his son and I, this is probably like later, 97, 98. I'm not really in order here. He'd keep his eldest son and I up to do some work. We did some yard work, and we'd clean up in the middle of the night, on a school night, not to mention. I think it was a school night, it was more the weekends. He'd get us on the weekends doing work for him at night. I didn't work fast enough. He got angry. Once again, lost his temper. And because I wouldn't hurry up, he took his hands, put it on my throat, and lifted me up in the air at the same time. I'm like, what the fuck, man? You're trying to kill me? Like, literally lifts me up in the air and literally chokes me at the same time. I can't even breathe. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Then he puts me down and he says, hurry up. So I hurry up the best way I can. I clean up, not knowing he had another plan in mind. So what happened is he'd locked me out of the house. I banged on that door as hard as I can. I banged on it, the front door, the back door, hoping either my mother or someone else would hear me. And I banged so hard, let me in, 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 let me in. And all of a sudden he answers the door and pow, 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 punches me in the face. Punches me in the head. I said, and I looked at him. I didn't even say anything. I looked at him and he says, why do you wake me up? And I say, well, you locked me out of the house. Well, you should have stayed out here. I said, and thought, as I said, I probably didn't say much, but I looked at him and I thought, am I a fucking dog to you? Am I a fucking dog to you? I may be out of order in the events, but I'm telling you how abusive this man was. It just gets worse from there. Like, that was the first time I ever got hit by a man. The first time. But it gets worse. And I'll tell you one thing, it's going to get even more worse. Because when summertime of 98 hit, I can tell you this, it's going to really, really be an eye-opener to anyone who's viewing this. I finished off 97 with my 11th birthday intact and everything, but this is what happened months later after my stepfather passed. My mother and him got engaged by early of 98. 5th grade was great, of course, and I passed, but my mother had me pulled back because of my math grades. Yep, I've been sucking at math since childhood, so surprise there. But this is what happened, mostly during the summertime of 98. This is what I would have to face. The whole good guy thing was a facade. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to correct my timeline here, and I'm going to say 97, the rest of 97, or a good portion of it, he was good. But only a good portion of it. Because once the late time of 97 hit, I started wishing this guy was out of my life. Started in spring, those events, and then it continued all throughout the summertime. So that was 2 things so far he did to me. And I'm sorry if my timeline's off. I'm just trying to remember this guy, all the good in him. But I just can't seem to remember the good. I seem to remember the bad. So by 98, that's where things started to take its toll. And you already got 2 things he did to me. I'll give you another one. In the springtime of 98, before school ended, and I went to my banquet thing, and I went to a field trip with the 5th grade. I don't really think he wanted me to go. A lot of things that are good that happen, to him, it was very undeserving. He'd pick me up, of course, from the field trip, and we'd all go to Golden Corral. Once again, around him, I did not feel deserving. Everything that I did that was fun with this man did not feel deserving. In his eyes, I was a pussy. And he had to toughen me up. And how does he toughen me up? Abuse. Fucking abuse is what I thought. That's how he toughened me up. And it's just going to get much worse from here, so you might as well grab the Kleenex. During that springtime, after the 5th grade came to an end, so I don't got much info on the first time for 5th grade. It was like, I didn't know what to do. I'm already repeating the 5th grade thanks to my mom. have to deal with this complete moron living in our house. And it just wasn't even fun at all. One time, it was on a weekend, he goes ahead and he asks me to clean the dog pen. Everyone was inside, relaxing, having fun. So let the pussy boy go out and clean, he thought, probably. My turn to clean the dog cage. One time, I didn't clean the dog cage, and he looks at me, and he's like, he doesn't like the fact I'm going slow. He wants me to hurry up. I'm doing the best I can. I was given a job that I should have had help on, but he didn't want me to have help. He wanted me to do everything by myself. That's how he rolled. Hard labor and abuse. So we went ahead and, I went ahead and just did the job. Wasn't going fast enough one time, and he looks at me and he says, "Now I want you to pick up a piece of that shit and eat it." It was dog manure. That was his own words. "I want you to pick up a piece of that shit and I want you to eat it." I'm like, "I don't want to. Do it or I'm going to hit you with this shovel." He had a shovel in his hand. So I had a choice. Disgusting breath or being paralyzed by a shovel. What was it going to be? Broken bones or getting hit with the shovel? Or nasty breath? I chose disgusting breath. I said, "Can I cut it in half?" He's like, "Help yourself." In a very cruel-like voice. So I go ahead and I eat it. And he's like, "How does it taste?" And I'm like, "How the hell do you think it tastes?" I'm thinking. And I look at him and just say in a scared voice, because I was scared of this man, deathly scared of him. And I said, "It tastes nasty." Truth? He says, "Hurry up." Knowing I was struggling during these times, my mother basically came to my aid. She knew something was up. I just didn't want to tell her. Because he would, once again, beat me to a pulp. So, she helps me get the water refilled. We finish the cleaning of the dog pen. And then I go back inside, finally. He says, "Is the dog pen clean?" I said, "Yep." He's like, "Good." So he acts one way in front of my mom while we're watching Waterworld. Pretending to be nice that time. Oh boy. But what he would do later would be far, far worse. I'm sorry I had to throw in a time jump, but I don't exactly remember what happened at the other half of 97. I just know he came into our lives, he was good, and he ended up becoming very, very mean. I was the only one during this time he was abusing. And the one that had to deal with his dark side more than my mother and my brother. He was nice around them, but around me, I don't think he could have stand me. I don't think he wanted anything to do with me. Either that, or the devil was playing with this man's head. if I remember correctly. But there's more to this, and trust me, keep the Kleenex out. Because I ain't even done yet. I have a lot more to tell you. And you will cry, and it will shock you. So you take care, and God bless you. Bye.